Welcome to the AI First Business Podcast with Tina Yazdi, where we show you how companies, teams, and leaders are turning AI hype into ROI. Sudarshan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
To kick things off, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Smallest.ai, which is the company that you founded and are currently leading?
Yeah, so my name is Sudarshan. I run this company called Smallest.ai. We build foundational voice AI models. So any sort of calling operation where there is a human involved behind a phone, our AI comes in and it can automate that call. So think about it as you don't know on the other end if it's a human or an AI that is speaking to you, but the AI can handle very complex operations such as customer support, sales, things like that. We build the sort of foundation voice models that empower those conversations. We work with very large enterprises, mostly in the financial sector, banks, fintechs, things like that. But we are slightly broad in the sense we also have customers from other industries. Over a year old, raised close to 8 million and 30-member team now, growing quickly. Yeah, that's a little bit about us.
Great. So I'm actually going to jump in the story a bit recently, but I think to understand how you saw what you saw, we will have to dig into your kind of like experiences leading up to Smallest.ai. But when we spoke, you shared with me that your approach was small models, and VCs at the time, I guess about a year ago or so, you can confirm, or thinking this is not the right approach. Everyone else is doubling down on $100 billion, foundation models. What made you double down on the opposite bet that VCs were saying is the way to go? And what was, before we give the story away, what was your initial reception of the idea when you first wanted to go to market and raise for Smallest.ai?
Yeah. No, I think so. Our background, me and my co-founder both, we come from autonomous vehicles. So the Waymos and the Teslas of the world. We used to work at Bosch. We were building for 2, 3 OEM companies and automobile companies who use our level 3 perception stack. So we were one of the founding team members at the level 3 team. And one of the things you have to do in autonomous vehicles is get these models to run in real time on the vehicle on the edge. And so the hardware, etc., is very constrained. You don't have infinite memory like in the cloud. You don't have infinite compute.
Yeah.
So
And for someone who might not know, what is the difference between edge computing and like cloud computing?
essentially, edge is like your mobile phone is an edge, your any sort of. Whereas in your cloud, it's running probably somewhere in a server. You have like a lot of physical space to create like larger and larger computers, which can run very, very heavy workloads, right? Versus edge, you have a limitation that oh, I can't build something that is bigger than this size. And so you have to sort of all the constraints that come up with that you have to take care of it. So that's the major difference. And then the form factor of edge also varies, right? What goes in a vehicle is very different from what the way the mobile phone is built is very different from some other devices built. And so you have to keep all those constraints in mind while creating a computer. And so that's primarily the difference. And coming back to sort of our stories, we've seen models that are really compact and efficient fit in the autonomous vehicle and navigate it in real time to a very complex task, which is autonomous driving, right? If it doesn't work, someone could get killed. But today, LLMs, if they hallucinate, I mean, it's completely fine. It's not like it's gonna break someone. So the
So
bar
the
was
stakes are high
exactly right. So the stakes are much, much higher
and the models were smaller.
and the models were smaller, and so you're still able to make it work. Generally as well, the logic that hey, you need a trillion parameters or 10 trillion parameters and suddenly it's going to become very intelligent, this narrative did not seem right to us. We had seen the opposite of that in our experience, and so that's why we felt small models could work. We also had some deeper mathematical sort of formulations of how these models should look like as they get more intelligent. But we and this is not something we only us, we are talking about
Right.
it. Jan LeCun is talking about it. Jan LeCun is one of the founding fathers of AI. He's
Mhm.
he's not that aggressive on LLMs and LLMs becoming more intelligent. So that was the reason we started out. And the reception to small models at that time was very bleak. It was
And
like
this is 2024?
this 2024, early 2024. So people were like, how are you going to compete against companies with infinite money, infinite capital, Google, OpenAI, all the Microsofts and likes of the world. And it took a lot of effort from us to raise our first round, basically. But then when we did that, there was no looking back. Today, everyone talks about small models. NVIDIA just released a paper around how small models are the future. And so, what we also see with GPT-5 today is that there are diminishing returns, right? One to GPT-5, there are not like, it's not a major jump in intelligence that has happened. So, what's happening is now people are realizing spending more money is not giving them more intelligence. It's not
Hmm.
larger models are getting smarter. And so, people have to think about other ways to innovate. And we're seeing our thesis come out today very well.
Right. So take me back. You have, you didn't just kind of make this bet to be a contrarian. This was already proven and kind of self-evident in a industry that had a lot of precedent with much
Yeah.
higher stakes, as you said.
Yeah.
So you have this, it's clear to you, you're going to VCs, they're like not buying it. Walk me through what was their initial reaction and what was the story of how you ended up getting to your first round?
Yeah. I think the initial reaction, obviously, with VCs, it's like when it's a no, it's never like a clear no. They will
Of course,
just,
they also want to keep the door
yeah,
open.
they will say,
Yeah.
okay, let's talk, let's keep the conversation open. So we had like many open conversations that were happening, but no one was like super aggressive on this is the company we need to back. And Smallest was just two people, me and my co founder, writing code
Hmm.
from our bedrooms for a very decent amount of time. I think very few VCs take very contrarian, very sort of foundational bets on teams, at least in India. And in the US, I think it's still better. But at that time, we were situated in India and, we had to work
Hmm.
with the constraints we had. I think what led to our fundraise finally is we built this small model. It was a text to speech model. And at that time, it was one of the world's fastest text to speech models. And so we created a launch video. We launched it on LinkedIn. Within like, a day or two, it got like millions of impressions. And then
Wow.
everyone was talking about it. It came in the news, and within 2 weeks of that launch, we closed our. So it essentially was 2 weeks of just us going from one meeting to another. I even forgot who all we met during that period of time because it was so hectic. And then I don't know when we got our first term sheet, but like we got it the same day we got another term sheet. It started getting a little competitive, and then we kind of closed the round. So I think with raising venture capital, I think it's always about making things competitive and getting multiple people interested at the same time, and
Hmm.
that's when good rounds happen.
So I think what's interesting about this is you didn't close your first customer or hit some kind of like revenue or product market fit benchmark per se. You just like published the model and did like a bit of promotion around it. What if you were kind of like to capture this? Do you think this was just a lot of serendipity and luck? Or is there something that some, founder who's listening could maybe learn and adopt this as of a like as a playbook, if you would?
Yeah. I think what is different from traditional businesses in AI is that it's really, really expensive and really, really hard to build even like the first version of it, right? Like, let's say I was selling juice. I could create a sample in my house and then go and sell it to my neighbors and then sell it to my community and make like a few $1,000s doing that.
Yeah.
Show that as revenue and proof of concept and then go to an investor. But
Mhm.
it's very difficult to do that with AI models. Just training like the first iteration of the model takes so much effort.
And why is that?
Just, I mean, the amount of you're innovating, they're doing something
Hmm.
that has never been done before. Whereas juice is
Hmm.
something that exists, you're probably branding it better and so on. But like the model we are trying to create was never created before. There was no model that was as fast as this one. And so we don't
Got it.
even know if it will work or not. It worked. That was a big part. And then the monetization is like another angle of it where you actually have to go and sell it to businesses and so
Yeah.
on, make it stable and all that. So um so I think for us that milestone of just even being able to create it was success
Yeah.
enough to show to others that we can build in this direction. And so that's why even though we did not have revenue, people were interested in investing in us. So I think for any founder building in deep tech, what is important is like a clear plan and clear sort of understanding of the market, who your
Hmm.
customers are, what's the size, what's the buying, are people buying today, are they not buying today, is this a growing industry, is it a dying industry? And then you obviously should have, you should be really smart as founders, or at least the VCs should perceive you as that, and then they would invest. So they on day zero, they're just trusting you. They are
Hmm.
not too worried about revenue and things like that. And then once they do that, I think the next step is to actually make that into a business model. And
Yeah.
so that's what the first round of funding is typically for. And so we got the funding, and then we built an MVP, and then we got our first customer. So that cycle is generally what's followed in deep tech.
So remember, guys, if you release something, make sure it works.
Yeah.
And then going into Smallest AI, you're specifically targeting like enterprise customers.
Yeah.
So, that's the focus that you picked. And you said one of the insights that you had and what you were seeing is people were sick of hearing, here's a model, figure it out yourself, which was kind of the situation at the time. Can you explain to us why that was the situation and what does that mean? Here's a model, figure it out. Like, what
Yeah.
does figure what out? And then how did you like kind of like insert yourself into that situation
Yeah.
and sell something a bit less figure outable, yourselfable?
So no, so that's a
That
very
was
good
English.
question. Yeah, so that's a very good question. And so we did not always think of doing enterprise, by the way. We
Oh, you
kind of,
didn't? Okay.
yeah, like we on day zero, we were kind of figuring it out, who are our
Hmm.
customers and so on. And so we saw that, there are thousands of developers signing up on our platform and trying things and so on, but none of that was actually leading to revenue. And
Yeah.
speaking to more and more customers,
Were
what
they
we,
just curious, or do you have any
yeah,
insight from that period? Like, did you speak to them, or
yeah, exactly. They were just curious. They were people, they were
they were
students
on
who,
LinkedIn and they were like, "What's this thing?"
exactly. What's this thing? It looks cool. Some of our friends have built something.
Yeah.
Let's try it
And do you
out.
have any insights on what they were like, what were they text to speeching on that first model?
Various random use cases. So someone is building like AI podcast. This was pre, what was the Google product? I forgot the name of the Google
Notebook
product.
LM?
Notebook LM. Yeah, this is pre Notebook LM. And then people would create like podcasts using it. People would create new content using it, dub existing content. People are building voice agents with it.
Mhm.
So at least like basic demo voice agents and things like that. And so very random use cases. But the thing is, a lot of these are pet projects. They are not like serious business use cases which people are trying
Yeah.
to solve. What happens is, it looks like you're making progress because there are so many people using your platform,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day it doesn't translate to revenue because none of these folks are super serious about actually solving like a
Yeah.
business problem and getting ROI out of it. But what did happen out of that effort is we became so popular, we started getting inbounds from a lot of enterprise CXOs, the CEOs, CTOs
Mhm.
of large companies, who are like, hey, this is cool and we actually have a solid business problem to solve. And so we ended up sort of speaking to them and trying to understand what would solve this. And the second question that you had was, how did you go from just, hey, this is like a model, go try it out, to we are going to solve a problem for you? And that also happened as a hard learning, right? Like we
Okay.
actually had, yeah, we had an enterprise and we are like, these guys probably know how to solve their problem. So let's just give them the model and let's
Yeah.
let them figure it
So
out.
they like take your model and then do the semantic training based on their business logic, and then they can use it. Would that be the typical way to do it at the?
Exactly.
Okay.
So they are building a voice agent and
Yeah.
they have all the logic, business logic figured out on their own, is was our assumption, and then they just plug our model in and the voice agent just works. And we have a documentation, so we are hoping that they will go through the documentation, understand how it works, and integrate and sort of take it ahead. But that is never how it
Not even
happens.
IKEA has figured out that.
Yeah. So
Put the nail
so
in this part. Yeah. The
yeah, I
A
mean,
slot, not the B slot. But okay, so that was your assumption, which I think is a fair one. But what was
yeah.
the hard learning? What happened at that point?
Hard learning is no one really wants to go and figure another platform out, right? Like there are plenty
Yeah.
of startups coming out and there are plenty of companies that are creating documentations, and like why would someone spend time understanding yours and figuring that out? And so people are willing to work with people who are actually closer to solving a problem for them. And so
Mhm.
what they need is, hey, this is my customer support process. And today, 20% of the call, how can you build
Like,
something that just
fix
solves
it.
that, right?
Like, they
So we
want that problem to go away.
yeah,
They don't wanna just implement something that's not the thing that
yeah,
they're trying
they
to do.
want
Okay.
us to come to their process and solve it than them to come to us and
Yeah.
kind of figure us out. And so we went from being like, engineers to actually solution providers. And we
Mhm.
actually went and understood their process. And we are like, hey, okay, this is broken. We should first fix this, then we integrate our model, then we should run a test. Then, if that test works, then we scale it up in volumes. And so we became more of consultants that provided a product offering than just like, model providers. And so that I think completely changed our sales process and gave us a lot of early success, basically.
And what were some of the most, like, surprising discoveries you made during that transition in terms of what it really looked like to implement something like this in an enterprise, or maybe, like, the amount of diversity that you had to deal with per customer? Or was there
Yeah.
maybe an obstacle that you wouldn't have guessed is, like, such a big deal, but is actually a really big problem and pretty consistently a big problem? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, tons of them. I think one of the major issues is obviously the data security, privacy, things like that. So
Mhm.
people had data in various places that are not accessible, and then how do you access that data in a secure format and run it? And so we figured out on premise deployments, which is basically our
Mhm.
code running in the customer's cloud, and so
Mhm.
their data never comes out of their system. So this is
Yep.
something we had to kind of figure out. And then there is one is the actual data security, but then you also have a trust angle of it. So we actually have a chief information security officer who comes on calls to customers, answers their questions around privacy, things like that. And so with enterprises, these things which you would never think are really important become super critical. And so we had to end up solving for these things before we could even go live with our first customer. This typically you wouldn't find this in non-enterprise sales. This is only
Got
with
it.
enterprises.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, on that, you shared a funny story because you mentioned your CISO several times when we first spoke, and I had to point out that I was surprised, given that you're 30 people and like a technology startup, you have a CISO already. That's
Yeah.
typically quite an enterprise role. What led you to having a CISO so early on, and how has that been kind of like transformational for your framework?
Yeah, it was very, very serendipitous kind of in the heat of things. We
Mm-hmm.
had this customer who was testing us out, and they really liked the product. And they're like, "Oh, this 100 list of questions around information security, can you answer it and send it back in 2 days?" And I was like, what is this even like? Oh, how do I do this? And then we ended up sort of looking at the market, and we found this guy who was actually willing to work with us very, very closely. And he kind of, I'm like, okay, we'll figure out how to work together, but let me first answer these questions for you. So he took
Mm-hmm.
a look at our system. He answered those questions. We had the basic certifications, HIPAA, SOC 2, this things like that. But then when you go to a large enterprise, InfoSec is a different beast. And so he, in those 2 days, helped us answer the questions. We got that client. We were so happy. We started speaking how do we work closely, and then he kind of ended up coming on board and solving a lot of things that were not solved for us, which we did not even know about, right? So
Yeah.
it happened very serendipitously in the heat of the moments, but today it's like he's an invaluable part of our onboarding process. Every single enterprise that comes in, I loop him in. He takes care of the
I bet
compliance,
it
and
makes
then
you look really good.
absolutely
Introducing our
the
CISO.
yeah.
You have a CISO?
Yeah, I mean, it makes us look really mature, like, oh, I mean, I have a CISO, that it's like a flex that I never imagined I would be pulling off. Um,
um, On that, I think what's interesting just as you're telling this story is what attracts, like, I mean, how I found you is like the sexiness of Smallest.ai and the kind of plot twist of the story of how it came to be in a really fast moving market. But it sounds like you spent a lot of the last year dealing with not the technology itself, dealing with implementation, change management, etc. Can you walk me through a little bit about what I guess we can categorize as enterprise resistance? There's like, I think, two notes that you shared, which is older enterprises generally are unwilling to even consider that their current systems would fail, if I understood
Yeah.
that correctly.
Yeah.
And then the other one is engineering leaders didn't know AI could do something like code reviews, for
Yeah.
example. What were some of the kind of resistance you encountered, especially implicitly, that made you stop in your tracks and be like, whoa, like I wasn't expecting that to be a problem? And how do you work through them to kind of get the
Yeah.
customer on board and meet them where they're at?
Yeah. I think when when we were really young, I was like, hey, this is a cool technology.
Really young, like last year or like a long time ago?
Last year, yeah. By the way, like
When
when
I
the
was
company.
really has it been a tough year, Sudarshan? When I was really young 1 year ago in my youth that has long been stolen from me.
I speak like a very old person, but yeah, I think it's just been such a fast year. We've learned so much, we've changed so much. And so, anyways, early on when we were starting out, what we realized was, we have a technology. It looks cool. People would not really jump on it and buy it. It's not like, hey, I've been waiting for this. No matter
I mean,
how to.
it sounds like engineers would jump on it to play who are similar to you.
Yeah, engineers would jump on anything that looks cool and kind of try to tinker around with it. But when you talk about like large enterprises, they are not like willing to completely switch their business process over. They're not in a hurry to do anything, right? So they are extremely risk averse as to introducing new technology. Because anything
But
going wrong.
can I just add a challenge here? You say that, but in the same breath, you said that you actually started in this direction because they were coming to you. So there sounds like there's a tension between.
Yeah,
I mean, they found you, they tracked you, they like tracked you down. So there's obviously some
yeah, yeah. No, I
pull
think.
that they did, but at the same time, they're resisting. What's going on with that kind of tension that you're observing?
So, one of the things to understand is an enterprise has multiple stakeholders internally. There are
Yeah.
people who have been tasked by the board to bring about AI transformation. Like, look, AI is doing incredible things for startups and SMBs, and we are seeing that company do well, but that company is not doing well. Can you figure out what works and bring that change so we can cut costs, increase revenue using AI, right? And so there are leaders, there are CXOs who want to implement AI, but then if you look at the business process under them, there are like thousands of people working in existing older methodologies, and they have a reason to keep their job or keep working the way they want to, they were working. And so even the CXO has to navigate a lot of internal sort of, structure, and they end up getting a lot of resistance as they try to bring about change. Right. So the whole change management process is not simple. And so you're
Yeah.
navigate across various stakeholders in an enterprise. And
So, question about that. What is the typical profile of that like first foot through the door? Like, what have you noticed there's kind of like some traits that the people who would approach you proactively or take the charge or be tasked with this, do they share some similar like mindsets, ways of thinking that differ from other people? And what are
yeah,
those that you've,
I think the biggest mindset is they want to make AI work, right? It's not like
but why?
they're.
Because I mean, no one wants it for the sake of it, but what is it? Why do they want it to?
I think the bigger thing is they are seeing a lot of inefficiencies in the org they are working in. They are actually seeing that hiring these humans at such large scale doing these menial jobs is extremely difficult. There is high churn, which means that people end up leaving quickly and then they have to rehire and manage those people. So their life is not easy and good. So one is that where they're actually seeing the organization being extremely difficult to manage and inefficient. And so
Mm-hmm,
it looks like AI is like a really sort of God given gift to bring about that transformation. The
mm-hmm,
other thing is they are just really forward looking, right? They know that they have to be pioneers in a particular technology, even though it is
mm-hmm,
young, for it to actually work out. And then it's like early days of the internet, companies that adopted the internet, built websites, outlasted the ones that didn't. And so they think about it as a sort of forward thinking project, which if they do not try, they might end up kind of losing out on the benefits of AI. So these are like two sort of angles of how I have seen leaders think. And an ideal fit through the door is always the top management, the CXO, right? So the CXO or the CTO wanting something will mostly, push through any sort of resistance across the org versus, let's say, someone at a very low level coming up and then trying to push it to the CXO. That also
Yeah.
happens, but it's generally slightly more difficult to
Yeah.
uh,
And do you have any observations on CXOs that push this through? Are there some approaches that you've seen kind of like maybe a pattern of like typical things they have to face and good, like best practices on what tends to be pretty helpful across multiple orgs that you see come up again and again?
yeah, I think so. The biggest thing is quickly proving value.
Mm,
So, like, yes, this is AI, but why should we use this? That has to come out very, very objectively when you implement our solution into their business process. And so, to do that, they have to remove any sort of barrier to, that might not let that happen. So, for example, if we don't have data access, they have to remove that.
hmm.
Don't know the reporting format or the metrics that are valuable to them, they have to help us understand that. But CXOs have to work very closely with us so that we can kind of work backwards from their goals and help them solve it. And
Yeah.
so most of the times the issues on our end are, how can we take our solution and make it work for this particular business, this particular use case. And so having a strong champion in the CXO will help us navigate through all the issues that might come up in the onboarding. Once the time to value is, shortened, and they actually see that, hey, look, in this business process, using AI, it is 30% more efficient than not using AI, then it's a
Yeah.
easier sort of win to have. And then you can navigate very, very quickly across and scale your solution, right? So getting that first win, getting that proof of concept very quickly is what we generally have seen where most drop-offs happen. If we go
Yeah.
through that phase, then it's easier to scale
It's a
up.
bit sticky. And when you say quickly, what are we talking about? Weeks, months?
A good enterprise would take 2 to 3 months. Bad one might take a year, but it's generally not very fast because there are huge stakeholders involved, and there are
Yeah.
like large budgets and things like that. But 2 to 3 months would be like a amazing enterprise win very early.
So we talked a little bit about kind of the mental landscape of like different stakeholders that you're talking to. You also mentioned you've noticed differences between like an enterprise adoption in the US versus India. You work with one of Asia's largest financial services company. I don't know if you can name their names, but what are some of the differences that you've seen and maybe some surprising differences that you wouldn't have expected to see?
Yeah, we work with customers both in US and India. So Asia's largest sort of voice market is in India.
Okay.
Yeah, so most of the sort of B2B calling budgets are spent in India, and then followed by the southeast of Asia, where there are a lot of call centers operating
Mhm.
for US and other countries. And so what we have seen generally is that the budgets for just spending on technology
Mhm.
experimenting is it's much higher in the US. And so it's easier to get a proof of concept done in the US
Mhm.
versus in India, where the budgets are low. And so what happens generally is people end up asking for free proof of concepts initially,
Mhm.
and so our team finds it difficult to prioritize, because if I'm working for free for someone else, will they even end up buying? I don't know what's the timeline and so on. And so we've generally seen that resistance to go for a paid pilot over a free pilot. So that's one of the things in US is people are willing to pay even though
Yeah.
it's a pilot. And so that's one of the major differences. The other thing is US generally does not have people, so they need AI to do things for them, answer calls for them.
Like cheap labor
Yeah, but compared to India, where the labor is like much cheaper, and so it's about
and the population is
convenience,
several times
much
larger.
much larger, right? So it's about convenience and sort of making, let's say, the cost make sense and things like that. Versus in
Yeah.
US, there's alternatives, so it's much
Yeah.
more burden problem there.
One concept I find myself coming back to in almost every conversation I have is there's this is an and not an or. There is validity to concerns about like impact on job, etc. But on the other hand, there tends to also be like you're growing the pie for certain situations. So what you just said that there's, especially in the US, for example, there's companies that don't have the resources to implement the right call center, create the right customer experience. Is growing the pie something that has like stood out to you in situations, especially with clients that you've seen otherwise wouldn't be able to scale in the way they want the customer experience and support that they offer?
Yeah, no, 100%. So, a lot of the business, while we don't actively directly sell to small and medium-sized businesses, but a lot of our sort of partners end up taking our product and selling it to them. And
Hmm.
major sales strategies that they use is a small business, let's say an individual clinic, would not have the
Hmm.
money to go and hire like a salesperson to go and promote that clinic, or like customer support if something goes wrong and things like that. But they do have a large amount of business opportunities that go to waste because people are not, let's say, there's no one to answer the front desk at night, or like you're not promoting that you have these facilities in your neighborhood. And so, what ends up happening is they just stagnate in terms of business growth. And suddenly with AI, what they get is they get a receptionist that's available 24/7. They have someone who can call up leads and kind of give them promotional offers, and also capture that data back into their system so they could sort of market to them and things like that, right? So a lot of small and medium sized businesses who were not able to get this additional manpower capacity that a large business can, suddenly benefits from AI coming in and actually being able to do that at a much lower cost and higher availability. And so we are seeing that success in the SMB space. In terms of enterprises, where we have seen sort of greenfield, where there was no one before and now AI is there, is generally places which, for example, require 24/7 availability of, I
Super
think
fair.
they never care what's going on, right? They just, yeah.
24.
Yeah, so greenfield use cases in enterprise are typically use cases where there's no human today doing that, and then
Yeah.
because AI is there, it's possible to do it. And sort of things like, let's say, large scale debt collection is one place where we have seen, AI being useful. Imagine like, India is a country with like 1.2 billion people, right? And then people are living in like various geographic conditions, various types of credit scores. How do you manage to distribute loans and also recover them in a very cost efficient fashion if they're not paid on time? And so you can't end up sending, let's say, a human if there's like a $200 loan, right? It's
Yeah.
just not gonna be possible. But with AI, what happens is you're able to call those people and remind them that, hey, you have money that you have to pay and you should pay it, otherwise your credit score will get affected. So there are these use cases which initially were not possible with humans that
Hmm.
today AI can do.
I see a note here. I don't remember if you added this note or I added this note. I'll read it to you. Maybe it triggers something. The PayTM/Mark Benioff curiosity trait.
Yeah, I think the point we were trying to discuss was that, hey, who are those sort of forward-looking leaders who are
Mm.
adopting AI faster than others? And these were some of the examples of companies that I felt were much, much forward-looking. They know the potential of AI. They actually build their organizations backwards to be able to utilize those benefits of AI, rather than sort of us trying to go and say, hey, this is how you should operate. They themselves know that, and then we are
Yeah.
just helping them achieve that goal. So these are some of the forward looking companies that I believe that
Hmm.
will completely transform the way they work because of AI, and then other companies will start following suit.
Got it. I have a couple questions around like voice AI specifically. So, in every kind of like technology transformation in the digital era, we've seen what typically happens is you kind of like replicate the analog version or the previous version into the new version. And what I mean by this is like the save icon was a floppy disk because previously there was a physical floppy disk and it was just kind of fossilized in the UI. Or the way like the desktop came about was just a replica of a physical table desktop in your workshop, right? And right now, voice AI, like the use cases we've discussed, are kind of that, right? They're replacing like existing things and just digitizing the analog version. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on like what is the true potential of voice AI? What can it do that's like exponentially different to what is possible before, rather than just replacing like calling insurance reminder, like
Yeah.
loan repayment reminders, right?
Yeah, I think I
Or
think
is
the
that
biggest.
it? Is that the best we can do?
No, definitely not. I think one of the things you should think of this as is humans have voice as the primary mode of communication with each other. So we are much more comfortable talking to each other. We generate more trust when we talk to each other compared to just texting, right? And so why is that not still true with AI? Like, why are we not communicating with AI as much as we communicate with each other through voice? And so I think the true potential of AI, voice AI, is when you have this personal AI at like a 7 billion, 8 billion population scale, where you just talk to it every single day and get things done. Every single user interface that you thought about, whether it's your phone or your laptop,
Hmm.
you can just interact with it through voice and say, hey, like, this is what I want to do today. And then the other way around, where the AI is also very proactive in talking to you, right? Like, it's not just like I always have to go and say, hey, Siri, do this for me, do that for me. The AI will come to you and say, hey, like, I did these three things today. What do you think about, should I prioritize for the next 3 days, right? And then these are five things I think you can do better that you kind of missed yesterday. And so AI being more proactive, communicating you through, to you through voice at a very, very personalized level, and across every single device, I think that is the next sort of frontier.
And have you seen this type of application in a like a clever way, or how do you like? Do you use voice AI in your daily life?
I think unfortunately, the big labs, Siri, Amazon, Alexa, Google, they have been like the worst at sort of, popularizing this or even building it to a level which today is possible with other technologies. Like smallest
And why
AI,
is that?
I think it's general lack of imagination is what I can tell, and internal, like,
Yeah.
companies being too large and too much into themselves. Like, you look at Apple, for example, Apple could have shipped Apple Intelligence, but there's still barely any intelligence in sort of the iPhones, right? Like, you can't ask Siri to basically book a ticket, and doing that properly will.
I mean, Siri and I are not on speaking terms right now.
So it's a little sad. I think it's just general incompetence or not able to focus. If you look at Google coming up with models, right? It happened because OpenAI kind of um woke them up. They had pressure from their board to kind of get their shit together. And
Hmm.
so I think the progress so far has been very abysmal. There's three fundamental changes. For example, imagine you having to talk to your laptop and having to do this, right? There is to be a dedicated effort on this personal voice AI assistant that can, yeah. But I think because of the amount of things that these large orgs, generally have to go through, not yet seen this kind of AI. I think going forward though, there might be startups that come and do this, and then one of these large orgs will end up acquiring them and actually building on top of them.
Yeah.
But generally, I have not seen great. I think a lot of this comes to your imagination and how what do you
Yeah.
think it should look like. And I think the big orgs generally do a poor job at.
So, how do you address the obvious security risks? Like, there's the ones we hear about where you have people impersonating other people for fraud or criminal situations. What are some maybe things that you're seeing that worry you that maybe you don't have an answer to? But what are some things that you're considering and seeing and that you think people should be mindful of?
I think the same things that you would do to keep yourself secure from other humans should also
Hmm.
apply when it comes to AI. So never give your your PIN code or what the sensitive details over a phone to a stranger. Always double verify before
But what
giving.
if it's your grandma,
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, if your grandmother is asking you for your bank account and like some details with
your
respect
birth,
to
yeah, date
what
of
you should.
birth, and yeah.
Yeah, you should be sensitive to it and try and understand why is this even happening. And so just be on a lookout for things that AI might be used for that might harm you. And so don't just coming out of a cave and suddenly there's a voice clone that's talking to you and you're caught off guard. Just be very aware that there are bad actors out there who will misuse technology, and always double check before sharing anything vulnerable. At the same time, with respect to use cases where security or generally like fraud and things like that could happen, as spam calls and like all of these places where people try to call someone else in a voice that is known to them, so
Yeah.
like mother, your grandmother, your friends, and then try to ask for sensitive personal details that you would otherwise not share, right? And so this is like the major sort of use case we have seen. And generally, like, this need not also be on a call. You could send like a voice note. You could send fake gen AI
Yeah.
videos. So it's like a big, like, the whole spoof spam thing is a big thing. And then just be careful on what is true and what is fake, and always double verify with sources of truth. That's the only way to to solve it. And so while we do put guardrails, and then there are compliances also. So if you are like
Hmm.
calling someone without their consent, for example, there is a compliance from the telephony provider themselves, which might flag you and kind of ban your account. But it is
Okay. So
still
kind of like similar to how emails that are spam or fraudulent get flagged
exactly,
in the system.
exactly. So while there are some compliances in place, but as you know, people find loopholes and
Yeah. So you
will
should
go
always
through it.
use, yeah,
Yeah.
be on the
And
lookout.
so just be on the lookout for it.
And my last question is, what are some mental models that you adhere to, especially like as a leader and a founder, that you always find yourself coming back to, or like your first principles?
I think the first principles is always to solve a problem, then build with AI. It's like,
Hmm.
kind of try to understand what are you solving that humans are facing today or businesses are facing today that is a burning problem for them, right? And if you're not solving a real problem, could use AI or you could use quantum computers or something else, but like it's not gonna end up helping anyone. And so I think always, while the technology might look cool, have to kind of go back to the drawing board and look at the problem you're trying to solve, and is it being solved and what will it take to get solved. And so always humble and always talking to customers and just being like at the forefront of the problem and
Yeah.
the solution is, I think, top priority for me.
Have you ever veered away from that first principle and fallen into the trap?
Yeah, I think the technology is so cool that time and again you kind of end up trying to, do things that without asking who's going to use this. I think it's like a delicate dance between being forward thinking and doing things people might not want. So because we are innovating, right? So we are always guessing, hey, if we build this, someone will use it, and then go back to sort of getting customer feedback once it's released. So we always have like a forward looking bet that we take. But so I'm constantly doing things. While I say that we should talk to customers, I'm also constantly doing things that customers have sort of never seen before. But at the same time, the idea is like as soon as we launch, we need to have 5 to 10 beta customers who we validate this hypothesis with. And so it's like a delicate dance between sort of future looking projects and current projects that we always have.
Got it. Any final thoughts before we end off?
No, I think building in deep tech now is the right time. If you're a founder or like a business operator, it requires some risk taking ability. Whether
Hmm.
you're trying to build your own AI business or whether you're trying to implement AI in your business,
Hmm.
it's not like a perfect technology, and so it takes some patience to deal with it. But then the rewards could be huge. And so, yeah, people who are willing to take that risk, I think they will make it to the future.
Nice. Sudarshan, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Tina.
Thanks for listening. If you've gained value from this episode, please drop us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a like on YouTube. See you for the next one.